My mom comes to me and she says, we are financially in a tough spot. Something happened with Iran where we're not able to bring money here anymore. But once I saw the fear and the trouble in her eyes, I kind of freaked out too. So the first thing I tried to do was reassure her, oh, we're gonna be fine. I said, don't worry about it, Mom, I'll take care of it. I was like, okay, if you're real, if you're up there, I need you. I need you, help me. For me, at that time, I would say my idol, God, was winning. Like winning competitions was God for me. Life was based around that. I was happy if I won. I was sad if I didn't win. And even when I won, even though I was happy, I was empty. So I remember just one day getting in my room and instead of asking for something, like I looked up and said, okay, every single thing I've asked, very clearly you've answered. What do you want from me? In church, the reason why I was so uncomfortable in church, it wasn't just worship, it was when they would talk about sin. I was like, man, I'm that guy they're talking about right now. I know winning was my idol, so I knew it when they talked about idols. It was very uncomfortable for me, but when I read about Jesus, it was like, he wasn't that. He was the opposite of that, and so I fell in love with him. People actually all the time, they ask me about this, like, can you really be a fighter and be a Christian? I work hard because God gave me a tool, God gave me a gift, and with that gift, I want to glorify Him.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. First question, how did you meet God?
Oh man, it's kind of a long story because even though I was born in Iran, I'm Assyrian. Assyrians are predominantly Christian, and they're typically either Orthodox, Catholic, or evangelical. So my father was Catholic, my mother was Orthodox, and I would say not so much my father, but my mom and my grandmas were devout. Me on the other side, I was not so much. Since there's this story in the Bible, like it's not a story, but there's this concept in the Bible where when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden, they went east. When Cain killed Abel, east. And so it kept going east all the way till the flood. Like, east is away from God. That's how you should look at east. You know, from the garden, they're just getting further and further away. I was, even though my family was in the house of God, I was always east of them. I grew up in the church, but I never went actually inside the church. We would go to church every Sunday and Friday. But for me, it was a social gathering. I'd go see my friends, and I would hang out with them. And this is in Iran. We hadn't come to America yet. I'd hang out with my friends. We'd go either, we'd go out, get ice cream. We'd go out, like, hang out with whatever. We just cause trouble, get in fights. We would do all of that, but the one thing we would never do was go actually sit in the house of God and listen. So anyways, it took a while till I met the Lord. I didn't meet the Lord till I came to America, went through high school, and I actually started training martial arts. And it was in my early 20s that I actually met the Lord, and I would say it was in my mid-20s I finally gave my life to the Lord. So I was very stubborn from day one.
So you said in your early 20s you met the Lord. What occasion was that?
So I was going through a hard time. My family came to America when I was 9 years old. We weren't well off, but at the same time we were struggling. So my mom took care of me. My parents split early on when we came here, and my mom took care of me, and she always took care of me. I was very spoiled in a lot of ways. I went through high school and I didn't have any issues financially, whatever. When I started 18, I started doing jiu-jitsu. No financial issues. I always worked only because I didn't like asking for money. It kind of bothered me to ask for money. Anyways, I always worked, but it was always for myself. It was always self-centered. It was for my competitions. It was for my hanging out, whatever it was always for myself. And I think I want to say either 22 or 23. My mom comes to me and she says, we are financially in a tough spot. Something happened with Iran where we're not able to bring money here anymore. We had a lot of land back home, and so the farming, and my uncle's back there still, and something just happened where embargoes were placed on Iran, and the ratio of the money changed so much, so we just hit a wall. And I had never seen my mom like this to come to me, who was kind of a spoiled brat at the time, to say, hey, like, I need help. And I saw panic in her eyes, like she was freaking out. And when she first asked me for help, I was like, I don't know why you're asking me, kind of deal in the back of my head. I was like, oh, whatever. But once I saw the fear and the trouble in her eyes, I kind of freaked out too. So the first thing I tried to do was reassure her, oh, we're gonna be fine. I said, don't worry about it, Mom, I'll take care of it. And she kind of looked at me like, all right, I don't know how you're going to do it, but okay, I believe you. So that happens. I go into my room, and at this time, I'm just doing jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu, I'm very good at it. I'm supposed to be the next big thing, but there's no money in jiu-jitsu. There's no real money in jiu-jitsu. The only way you can make money is if you start a gym, but that takes years. It wasn't something I was planning on doing anyways. So I go to my room, and I'm freaking out. And I've always known the concept of God and whatever, and I'm like, and so I at this point, by the way, I've spent so much time in jiu-jitsu, I pushed away friends, family, because all I wanted to do was compete. For me, at that time, I would say my idol, God, was winning. Like, winning competitions was God for me. It was my whole life was based around that. I was happy if I won. I was sad if I didn't win. And even when I won, even though I was happy, I was empty. And I knew I was empty because I would win a tournament in the beginning and I'd be happy for weeks. And then I would win a tournament, I'd be happy for a week. And then it was days. And then it would be like, these tournaments don't matter, only the big ones matter. And then I would win the big ones and I'd be like, no, this isn't enough. I got to go to the next big one. Anyways, that was, for me, God was winning. But at that point, I had lost, in a lot of ways, people who I could reach out to. So I didn't have anyone to the left. I didn't have anyone to the right. So I looked up. I was like, okay, if you're real, if you're up there, I need you. I need you, help me. And, that was really it. And so during this time, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. I thought I had fought MMA before, but just for fun. Again, jiu-jitsu was my goal. I had fought MMA just for fun. And I had an MMA coach. I didn't reach out to him. He actually reached out to me. This is maybe a week or two after I started praying. He reaches out to me and he says, do you want to fight MMA in Brazil? And I'm kind of like, Brazil? As a jiu-jitsu practitioner, It's Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Right, yeah.
So I've been wanting to go to Brazil to compete there, but it's expensive. I don't, I can't afford it, and whatever. I've been wanting to go there for a while, and I was about to tell him, hey, I can't go because it's, I can't afford it. He's like, no, you don't understand. They're going to pay you. And when they told me how much they were going to pay me, I was shocked because I had fought MMA before. And when I fought MMA, it was like a couple of $100, and then I have medical fees, which were more than the couple of $100 that I made. So I was in reality paying to fight, but just so you can say, hey, you fought MMA, it was cool. Anyways, he said that to me, and he said how much I was going to get paid, and I was like, no way. I was like, yeah, I'm in. So I want to say like 4 or 6 weeks later, I was in Brazil. I fought some guy who was supposed to be their Brazilian boxing champion. I beat him in the first round, and then I come home. I come home and I give my mom the money, and I was like, here you go, we're good, right? And she looks at me and she's super excited. She's like, yeah, we're good. for like this month, or maybe, and even maybe in the next month, but we have these bills, we have debt. And she just starts talking about all this stuff that we have and that we have to pay for. And same thing basically happened to me. My heart sank and whatever. I said, okay. I went back into my room and I did the same thing. I prayed and I said, listen, if that was you last time, I need you again, basically. I kept doing it again. I kept asking, I was begging, basically. I was begging, and then a friend of mine reached out to me. His son used to train jiu-jitsu, and he trained a little bit, but not a lot. And he said to me, hey, I want to train more jiu-jitsu. Can you help me? I said, of course. I went to teach him, and I worked with him one-on-one. And after the practice, he's like, he gave me some money, and I was like, I can't take this. We've been friends, we've been through a lot, and he's a lot older than me, he's like, shut up and take it kind of deal. He's not the type to mess around. He always like goes straight to the point. And I said, okay. And then right before I'm going to leave, he grabs me. He's like, so when are we going to do this again? And I was like, whenever you want, I guess. And then that turned into like 3 to 4 times a week. It was incredible. So, and then my coach calls me. He's like, hey, my jiu-jitsu coach just left. Could you teach at my gym too? I was like, yeah, I can, I guess. So I start teaching, and I'm like fighting every couple of months, teaching, fighting, and somehow we're just making it by the skin of our teeth, but we're making it. And some months I would even have some extra money, so I'd be like, look at this, Mom. We can put some extra money down on all the stuff we have to take care of. Anyways, that's just how it was. I would pray and doors would open. Every single time I prayed, doors open. It got to a point I was like, what is going on here? So I remember just one day getting in my room and instead of asking for something, like I looked up and said, okay, every single thing I've asked, very clearly you've answered. What do you want from me? Like I remember saying, what do you want from me? And it's so funny because as soon as I prayed that, right in my head, like almost like the whole light bulb thing that people have with TV or whatever. I had that moment because my wrestling coach, who's my pastor still, he had always invited me to church, but I always told him I got training on Sundays, I can't come in, and I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, he's invited me to church more times than I can count, I think. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to church. I go to church, and I gotta be honest with you, it wasn't like a happy experience like everybody. I don't know how everybody's experience is, but it was very awkward for me. I went into church, and first the worship, the music, very awkward for me, just because I don't normally dance, and then to praise God like that, I hadn't experienced it, so it totally threw me off. But I knew that's where God wanted me, so I stuck around. And then we would go into the teaching, and then the teaching I tried to listen as best as I could, and always came back to Jesus. No matter which sermon it was, it always circled back around to Jesus, and I just got intrigued, and I stuck around. I stuck around for as long as needed. This is the way I would put it. Even though I was really uncomfortable. But then ultimately what did it was I wanted to know who this guy was, who this Jesus guy was, and I felt like every Sunday wasn't enough. It's too slow. It's like once a week. So I picked up my Bible and I said, I'm gonna figure all this out. I picked up the Bible and I started reading. Everyone said to me, start with the New Testament. That's where you want to start. No. I started with Genesis. I started with Genesis, and I started going through Genesis, and it was a slow process. I think it took me like 2 years to read the whole thing, but I finally got to the New Testament, and then I read Matthew, I read Mark, I read Luke and John, and just the character of Jesus, I saw everything that he was that I wasn't. Like I said, in church, the reason why I was so uncomfortable in church, it wasn't just worship. It was when they would talk about sin. I was like, man, I'm that guy they're talking about right now. I know winning was my idol. So I knew it when they talked about idols. I knew, obviously I was a sinner and all, like fornication, like whatever you want to talk about. I was a sinner. I was self-centered as they get. So like, it was very uncomfortable for me. But when I read about Jesus, it was like, he wasn't that. He was the opposite of that. And so I fell in love with him. And obviously, like I said, it took a long time. I was very stubborn. I would give part of my life to him. Like I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do this his way. And then this I'm not going to do yet his way. I'm going to wait a little bit longer. And so I kept wrestling with it. But then eventually, finally, he broke me down. I want to say I was 24 or 25. And then I finally gave my life to the Lord. Just fully, I said, I'm going to do my best to follow you. Obviously, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. But that's been my goal since my mid-20s, is to follow the Lord. And I they say you're supposed to give him your heart. I was like, take everything, like take it all, like my heart, my mind, my limbs, whatever you want, take it. Just let me do this right. That's pretty much what happened.
Wow, so that was a journey for you to fully surrender to the Lord.
Oh yeah, right. I had a lot of. I guess you can call them strongholds or whatever you want to call them, but I had a lot of things that I just wanted to do my way. The story of Jacob and God. So I'm just glad he was a better wrestler than me too. So we wrestled, but fortunately he overcame, and I saw I saw the world from his eyes, and I recognized like what I was missing out.
He is so patient.
Amen.
And he's so loving.
Still is, yeah.
He still is, but I'm sure that those years that you were, you want to give all to him, but yet there's still some things that you want to hold on because you want to just make sure that if something that you like, if it's better than the Lord, maybe you keep that. But what was the pivotal moment that you said, okay, Lord, you take everything? What was that final straw? Because it was years, right, for you to finally surrender to the Lord.
Yeah, honestly, it was probably marriage. Because I didn't want to get married. I thought marriage would get in the way of fighting and winning. So I was like, I know this is what you want. I see it in everywhere in the Bible, but it's going to get in my way, kind of deal. And so I didn't want to get married, and even though Victoria at that time, we weren't dating, but she was around, and I recognized her like being special, but I just never pursued it because I was like, she's gonna get in the way of my actual work, But I remember once like the Lord said, no, you need to move on, like you need to stop doing what you're doing. That was pretty much it. I remember I was on a trip with my pastor. We came back. I finally asked her out. I would say that was like the final straw.
That's so awesome that you find that's when you literally just surrendered to the Lord, because you knew that He have such an awesome plan for you.
Yeah.
And so since then, what was your life like since walking with the Lord?
There's been ups and downs, but man, I don't know how to explain this to people, but I always tell people it seems like in my downs, He's always the closest to me. And the truth is, He's always close. But when I'm down, I'm able to hear Him better because I stop looking and listening to everything else. So I can hear Him better. But I've had success in my career, and I've had a lot of failure. There was a point in my career where I went through loss, draw, loss, and this was 2-year period. Typically, people fight like 3 times a year, but I was dealing with a lot of injuries and things like that, and dealing with those injuries at the end of those 2 years. I was even, at that time, I was only engaged to Victoria, but I was talking to her, but I was like, maybe I might need to retire because my body's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, and I'm really struggling. But what we did was we spent a lot of time in prayer, and God said it's not time yet. And I said, okay. When you tell me it's time, you tell me it's time, but it's not time yet. So I ended up going into a ton of physical therapy and just, spending a lot of time in prayer. And people were pretty much saying this guy, his career is dead. In a lot of ways, like I was at one point ranked top 5 in the world, I'm positive top 10, but I think top 5 as well. And then I dropped down out of the rankings. I wasn't ranked any longer after those 2 years. So I went from that to that. People were looking at my career as dead. I was already in the grave, And if
He resurrected you back.
That's what I always tell people. Like, people always go through a hard time. I was like, listen, my career was dead. If he can bring my career back to life, he can bring yours back to life too. And I always tell people, he literally brought me back to life when it comes to mixed martial arts, because I was supposed to be done. And we're now here. We're back at even better than before. So that's what I tell people.
Have you ever asked the Lord why He want you to be in the sports? Because when people hear, a Christian, and he's a Christian and he fights and he competes, like, I guess there are talks around town as if, how could a Christian do that? But I'm sure God can use anyone for His glory. For
fighting, oh man, people actually all the time they ask me about this, like, can you really be a fighter and be a Christian? Obviously, I don't try to get like technical with them, like what about David or what about this guy? I don't go into the details, but I always say like this. Listen, what I do is a competition. As long as I stand inside that octagon and the man in front of me, I don't have hatred towards him. It's just a competition. It's not anything. I'm not doing anything with malice, and therefore I'm not committing a sin. Here's the thing: if I step into that octagon and I hate the man in front of me, then we have a problem. So that's how I've always looked at it. Like, I don't compete out of hatred. I compete for the audience of one. I work hard because God gave me a tool. God gave me a gift. And with that gift, I want to glorify Him. Imagine God gives you a gift and you just squander it. Like, you just, or use it for something else. That's how I try to explain it to people. Like, this is what God's given me. If I was to walk away from it, I'm walking away from a gift that God gave me. You have to understand the heaviness of that. It's not something I can just walk away with like that. So there's a reason why I train so hard. There's a reason why I leave no stone unturned, because if I do, I am literally pushing away the gift that God gave me. And that terrifies me in a lot of ways. Same thing with my family, with my wife, my daughter. These are gifts from God. So I have to make sure I do everything in my power to serve them.
Have you ever thought about the fact that you're still competing and doing so, you're on the top of your game? The Lord allow you to be in the top. At the same time, He's opened doors for you, so then you have the chance, opportunity to share the gospel, because there are so many people out there, especially in the UFC, the martial arts, MMA world. A lot of them are lost and searching, and they're seeking, and so when you're there, you're light in the darkness.
Yeah, I remember there was a fight. I want to say it was in California. It was against the guy named James Vick. I remember being in right before I walk out, and I remember just looking around with the culture of MMA. You have just the way people act. Sometimes they're drinking, and then you have whatever the way people. I'm surrounded by a certain thing, and I remember like, man, I hate this part of this, and I hate it. And I remember saying, I don't want to be here. And I remember very clearly in my mind, the Lord saying, I put you here. There's a reason why you're here. And I was like, okay, that's it. And then I went out there like there's I can't just go and hide. If I'm the salt, if I'm the light, I need to get out there. I'm not going to hide. And so I do think about it. I do understand that God has given me a platform, and every opportunity I get, I just need to share the gospel. Like, there's the parable of the sower. He sows seeds. You have the good, the not so good, and whatever. Yeah. Here's the interesting thing. He never decides where the good is. He has one job: put his hand in his pocket and just toss out the seeds. He doesn't decide, and that's kind of supposed to be with us. We don't decide where God's going to put us. We don't decide who gets the gospel. We don't decide why they get the gospel. We have one job. We share the gospel. You see a person who doesn't know the Lord, and you that's all you have to do. You share the gospel with them.
And when I'm sure you have tons of friends that are fighters in the UFC world, and so how do you approach, or how do you share the love of Christ to some of your friends who don't believe in Jesus, and they're struggling, and they said they believe in God, but they don't know the Lord. So can you just share briefly of your experience, how you can, in the past or currently, that you can literally just say, hey, Jesus is the way, the truth, and life?
There's multiple ways. For example, a lot of times it'll be one-on-one conversations. That's one I really enjoy. But it's also kind of difficult too, because sometimes we get so focused on making our point, we miss the mark. Yeah. Another way is we have a Bible study at our gym, and I own my own Kings MMA gym. We have a Bible study there. We'll do a monthly service like a church service, and my favorite is people just come sit down during the Bible study just to listen. Sometimes they're not believers, but they just come sit down and listen. And so what we do is we just go through the Bible, and then I love it when they come ask questions, because once they ask questions, that's the opportunity I need. But a lot of times it's just how you act, how you walk with the Lord. People pay attention to that. If you walk with Him well, if you hold on to Him tight, people will look at you and be like, I want to hold on to this. I want to hold on to Jesus too, man. If it looks that good, So I think that has a lot to do with it, is how you walk with the Lord.
Sometimes, like you said, we don't have to say so much, but it's just your lifestyle, your actions.
Yes.
Do you have a lot of friends or certain friends that the Lord put in your heart to pray for them, because you know that they need the Lord, but you just know that it's so hard to without Him?
Yes.
In this industry,
there's a lot. I mean, in this industry, outside of this industry, so. And the truth be told, over the years, some of them that I prayed for have actually been saved, and some of them I'm still waiting. And I'm going to be patient, and I'm going to continue to pray. But some of them have been saved, and so that's another reason why I'm hopeful, because God is faithful. So I've seen miracles already, and I'm not worried. More miracles will come.
I know right now you're getting ready for your upcoming fights. So it's coming soon. If you don't mind, just share just a little bit. What are you looking forward to this coming fight, and what's your goal for this upcoming fight?
So what I'm looking for is just fighting. I haven't fought in a long time. Like I said, my nature, like I said, I was always east. I'm a little bit, I'm not gonna lie to you, not a little bit, a lot broken. Like, one of the things that I enjoy most about fighting is I get to break somebody. It sounds horrible, but it's the truth. That's just how I am. My favorite thing in competition is when I meet somebody and it's a push, and we're pushing. And sometimes they can even be better than me. But if I could just be relentless and continue to push and push and push, and then I start to feel somebody start to slow down and break, I take joy in that. So that's something I'm looking forward to, is just getting back into that octagon and fighting, because I really enjoy fighting. But the thing that I'm most looking forward to is even though by nature I was a savage, by grace I'm a servant. So I'm most looking forward to glorifying God. That's what I'm looking forward to.
You're going to the Middle East? Mm-hmm. Anyone that you have in mind that the Lord put in your heart to pray for the people to encounter the Lord while you're there?
Specifically, I would say my people in Iran. I mean, there's a lot of them, but Iran right now is going through a really hard time. Right now, you know, the government is it's a very tough government. It's totalitarian. They use their religion to just put people in bondage, is the best way I can put it. And they're just hurting and killing people doing that, and that's those are people that are on my mind right now. And the thing I would love to just share with them is, like, it's true that the government has you in bondage, and physically maybe you won't be able to get your freedom, but true freedom comes from the freedom giver, and that is Jesus. That's really what I want to tell them. Like, no matter what your situation is, you have genuine freedom in Jesus, because He is the giver of freedom. So that's something I would like to tell them, and I hope they understand. But you know, everything in its time.
Amen. What about looking at life and looking at the current situation, or just looking around you, the I would say the male lifestyle these days? Do you have any message you want to share with those young brothers out there that are, you know, from a man perspective, or you're a father, you're a husband?
For young men, or, well, there's a couple of messages. If you're young, if you're in your teens, get ready to grow up. Like, there's being a kid and goofing off has a season. Make that season short, because to be a man, there's greater joy in being a man, being able to take care of your family, to being able to provide, and prepare to do that. Be willing to do that, because these things are important. Strong men makes good society. So that's one thing I would say. And for pretty much all men, I would tell them your first ministry is your wife. If you can't serve your wife, you're not going to be serving anybody else well. So focus on that. Focus on, you know, not staying kids. And then for those who are getting ready to get married or are married, remember that your first ministry is your wife. You better serve her, and you better do a good job in that, and then be ready to move on to something else. Because as a leader, that's what we do. We serve. So serve your wife first, and then everything else will take care of itself.
Interesting. That word sounds very foreign to a lot of men these days. Serve your wife. The word serve, it sounds really foreign to a lot of people.
What did Jesus do, right? He's the leader, but he was a servant leader. So he's our example. And you know, the Apostle Paul talks about this very clearly when he talks about the church and Christ. And even though, you know, women are supposed to be obedient, they forget men are supposed to serve as leaders. It's both in both ways. We both have to be obedient. We both have, you know, someone we have to be obedient to, and you know, this concept of men serving their wives, especially back then, it was radical. Like, if you think about it, it was radical. In that time, in the Roman time, and even among the Jews, it was radical. Come back today, it's still radical. That is the thing about Jesus. He will always be counterculture. So if you want to follow him, be ready to be counterculture.
Amen.